Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. We're going to entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda with just the following change. We've had a request from staff and the applicant to pull resolution 2019-340. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been the agenda as printed with the exception of the removal of 2019-340 has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Musich.
I'm just wondering if there are any additional changes to the agenda that have been made since it was sent out on Friday?
Deputy Superintendent.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the agenda carries. I would entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of October 2nd.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the minutes of October 2nd? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the minutes are approved. Reports of officers, Superintendent Bangora.
All right. Thank you, President Board and Commissioners, and welcome everybody. So we'll start with athletics, aquatics, and ice arenas. Aquatics, fall swimming lessons, registrations at Phillips Community Center are going great with 532 participants registered. 393 of these are receiving scholarships. So wonderful numbers for our swimming lessons. The culturally sensitive women's only swimming lessons have 34 participants. And adaptive swim lessons kicked off the week at Phillips Aquatic Center, PAC, and we are happy to say registration is full. The new program is being supported by the Walt Dietzig Innovation Grant. Golf, about 160,000 rounds of golf have been played so far in the 2019 season. Gross Golf Course leads the way with almost 33,000 rounds. 2011 player cards were sold in 2019, almost an increase of 700 from the 2018 season. It's great news. Recreation Center programs. Waite and Audubon Park monthly senior luncheon. One participant celebrated her 100th birthday, so congratulations on whoever that person is. It's amazing. 35 people were in attendance and enjoyed a German-style sausage lunch. Bingo followed along with a birthday cake. Youth development. Rug Plus is planning an MEA activities and trips to include an apple orchards, fall-themed crafts, science museum, and pumpkin patches. Rec Plus children at Matthews Parks are pictured. If you see that picture, that's Matthews Park. We're going to now go into planning. The Upper Harbor Terminal. The next round of community engagement is beginning in late October through November. These next few months will be an important time to help shape the park. Please watch the MPRB website for details, and we would love to have your participation and attendance at these meetings. Towerside Innovation District. MPRB is working with partners to develop the new park in the Towerside Innovation District, located across from Prospect Park Light Rail Station. Construction is underway, and MPRB plans to bring this new park into our system late this fall. The park will close a park gap identified in the east of the River Park Master Plan, which is corresponding towards the MPRB goal that all Minneapolis residents live within walking distance of a park. The new park will include community gardens, flexible green space, and a picnic pavilion. Forestry. Forestry partnered with Tree Trust and the local tree planting group called the Autonomous Collective to facilitate tree planting on private properties in North Minneapolis. Having recognized the need for trees following the 2011 tornado, Autonomous Collective provided nearly 200 trees that were planted with the help of volunteers. So thank you so much to the group Autonomous for providing that service in those 200 trees. Maintenance and operation. Bringing water assets to shore, docks and sailboat buoys. Postseason recaps, lessons learned. Meeting with different team members to review and improve restroom, sailboat buoy, and rental practices. We're also preparing for winter, checking for equipment needs and getting crew leaders ready to train the team on shovel plow routes, rinks, and safety practices. Environmental management reports. Eloise Butler Wildflower Garden and Bird Sanctuary. The 112th Eloise Butler Wildflower Garden and Bird Sanctuary season is ending. The garden is now closed for weekday visits as of Wednesday, October 16th, today. The garden will be open for the remaining weekends of October, which is October 19th, the 20th, 26th, and 27th, from 7:30 a.m. until 1 hour before sunset. The 2019 Wildflower Garden season saw a significant increase in visitors and program participants. As of September 30th, 2019, more than 3,600 youth and adults participated in naturalist-led programs, a 30% increase from the same time period in 2018. Of the approximately 60,000 annual visitors to the gardens, more than 18,300 visitors stopped in the visitor shelter to learn more about the wildflower garden, plants, and wildlife from naturalists and volunteers, to view displays, and to partake in hands-on learning activities. This is a 31% increase from our highest record number of annual visitors to the visitor shelter, and there's still 1 month to go. Amazing numbers. 1,634 people participated in nature-focused activities at the Walter Dietzick Recreation Innovation Grant funded mobile education cart at Worth Lake Beach this summer. AIS inspection program. As of Tuesday, October 15th, the boat launches shifted to an all on-call program. Launches are now from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily. Patrons can access the lake and exit the lake by calling a posted phone number on the on-call inspection board. The boat launches closed for the season on December 1st. A real quick note on open time comments. I personally wanted to address open time comments about the improper use of chemicals in or around Lake Harriet and the Roberts Bird Sanctuary. That was conveyed to us at open time last board meeting. We are aware of these reports and take these allegations very seriously. We have asked that anyone who has evidence to support those claims, please provide that information to us so we can fully investigate the matter further. Customer service. Summer Ambassador Program wrap-up. Despite modern technology, the most heartwarming way to reach others is still face-to-face. That's exactly what happened this summer when our ambassadors warmly welcomed over 10,000 visitors to Minnehaha Falls, the Stone Arch Bridge, and the Sculpture Garden on the weekends from Memorial Day to Labor Day. In full uniform representing the NPRB, 13 ambassadors staffed these sites on weekends, in addition to also working on at weddings and events all summer long. Park patrons were delighted to see our ambassadors, who provided helpful information and answered every question imaginable, from the location of bathrooms to details on where to hike or what we're doing about the coyotes. Patrons eagerly shared their personal experience throughout their lives in the parks. In return, the ambassadors felt that their experiences in the parks were equally rewarding. And I'm so appreciative for that and wonderful work that our ambassadors did this summer. And with that, President Bourne and Commissioners, that's the reports of officers.
Thank you, Superintendent. Do Commissioners have any questions from the Superintendent's report? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I'd entertain a resolution for items 2019-343 through 349. Is there a motion?
So moved.
The consent agenda has been moved. Is there a second? Is there a second? The consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on items 2019-343 through 349? Seeing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the consent agenda passes. Moving on to reports of committees, Chair Meyer.
On behalf of the Legislative and Intergovernmental Committee, I'll move Resolution 2019-337, a resolution authorizing the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board staff to apply for grants through the 2020 Hennepin Youth Sports Program up to the amount of $300,000 each for athletic field improvements at Falwell Park, athletic field improvements at Painter Park, athletic field improvements at Phelps Park, and tennis dome replacement related to the Fred Wells Tennis and Education Center, located adjacent to the Leonard H. Neiman Sports Complex at Fort Snelling.
The resolution has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Cogill.
I'd like to make an amendment.
to the resolution. I'd like to add the skate park at Elliott Park to the end of the list of grants that we are applying for. So that would just add and the skate park at Elliott Park.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Cogill. It sounded like there was a second. The resolution has been, or the amendment has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the on accepting the amendment? Commissioner Forney.
Thank you. Just some concerns that I have. I'm not sure that everything's been resolved with the original at Central, and I just don't want to set us up for any, should I say, failures. So I just want to make sure that whatever's happening at Central, hopefully those things are getting resolved so that we can be a productive project at Elliott. I have concerns, so I just want to articulate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Commissioner Cogill?
Thank you, President Bourne. Just to speak to this amendment, the skate park project at Elliott Park, I think, is a kind of cornerstone project for the larger skateboarding community and the entire movement of having more publicly accessible, usable skate parks, not only in Minneapolis but throughout the state. Which is an initiative that is being spearheaded by a variety of community members here in Minneapolis and beyond. It's a park in my district that has incredibly diverse use, and it would only be enhanced by having this happen. We have kind of two pots of money that are, as I understand it, are being used to bring two different skate parks together, or elevate two skate parks, and neither of them are really getting to that place. And I don't think that putting it on the table to get this money, and especially for a project that's this kind of important to a larger movement, is a negative thing. And I would be very surprised if we didn't see substantial turnout from the skateboarding community to really articulate why this is of a value at the Hennepin County Board level. So that's why I'm bringing it forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Cogill. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions? No. The resolution is amended. Is there, with one vote of opposition, is there discussion on the main motion? Commissioner Severson.
Thank you. President Bourne, I thought we had an agreement with Minneapolis Public Schools transitioning from south side to north side on these requests. Have we had conversations with them about that, or about how we go after this money, so like a no-compete clause?
It looked like there might have been some staff that were looking to respond. Mr. Swenson?
President Bourne, Commissioner Severson. School board indicated to us that they would not be applying for Hennepin Youth Sport Grant money for the 2020 award year. So we went ahead and added a project in the district, and we were using the same methodology we used with Phelps to reapply for a portion of Falwell.
Perfect. Thank you for being diligent on that.
Is there any further discussion on the main motion as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor of 2019-337 as amended, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions, the resolution passes. Chair Vita.
On behalf of the Administration and Finance Committee, I would like to move Resolution 2019-339, a resolution approving amendment number 2 to the Active Network LLC contract related to language translation services.
339 has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. Chair Vita.
I'd like to move Resolution 2019-340, a resolution approving.
Chair
I'm
Vita,
sorry.
yeah.
I have this one scratched out.
341.
341. Resolution 2019-341, resolution authorizing the creation of a parkland dedication and operation operating agreement with Hennepin County Housing and Redevelopment Authority and the City of Minneapolis for donation of Market Square to satisfy the parkland dedication requirement for Lake and Hiawatha, located at the southwest quadrant of Lake Street and Hiawatha Avenue, and releasing to Hennepin County Housing and Redevelopment Authority all parkland dedication fees paid and related to Phase 1 of Lake and Hiawatha.
341 has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Forney.
I just wanted to articulate, as I did last time, unfortunately, our representative from Hennepin County was gone, and just to say how grateful I am for this huge, huge investment and gift. So, appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Is there any further discussion on 2019-341? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, 2019-341 carries. Chair Vita.
I'd like to move Resolution 2019-342, a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Transpark Incorporated for parking meter services in the amount not to exceed $300,000 through October 2022.
342 has been moved. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on 2019-342? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. Chair Forney.
I'd like to move Resolution 2019-338, resolution accepting the non-appointed Citizen Advisory Committee recommendations and approving concept plans for Holmes Park Playground improvements.
338 has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
2019-338 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the resolution carries. Moving into unfinished business. I think this is the first time in a while. Welcome back, Assistant Superintendent Cox, for a program update on recreation.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you for the kind welcome. Tonight I am going to do two very brief updates on Recreation Division programs. And I'll start with the Youth Land Redesign Plan as discussed at the last time I was before you back in June, I believe it was. So just as point of background, if you all remember, in the spring, we completed an examination of Youth Line's programmatic successes, its impacts, and its opportunities for growth. This was really to help us understand what's going well with the program and where could we experience some improvements or changes that will benefit kids down the road. The methodology for that research was staff interviews, and that included both active Youth Line staff members, rec facility specialists, who was kind of their partner in the work. We also did some cross-departmental interviews as well, so to help to get the perspective of other folks who interact with the program. How are they seeing it? What do they experience? And what are their thoughts? We did some youth focus groups. We reviewed mosaic data and also some other program reports and evaluations. So from that research, the evaluator boiled down all of the work to 7 themed areas. And I know that's kind of hard to read, but as we go through this, you'll get a clearer picture of what this is. We're going to focus tonight on themes 1 through 4, and the reason being is because 5, 6, and 7 has kind of been distilled down into those 4 as well. So theme 1 suggests that the perspective of the service model varied by person. So as many people as you asked, you got that many different perspectives of what the program scope is and what its purpose was. And so to address that, we feel that we need to clearly articulate the mission, the vision, the activities and output of the program so that people have the same understanding of the why of it and have a shared understanding of how. And so the rationale is without a well-articulated and measurable framework, data collected cannot be linked to program outcomes, nor can program outcomes be revised or changed in a way that reflect progress towards the goals. So our action under that theme will be to develop clearly defined overarching program goals. Again, making sure that everyone has the same understanding of how this program is to operate, what the expectations are, and what we can expect at the end of a student's time in the program. We will also develop outcomes which are aligned to the program goals will be aligned to the overarching goals, which will be aligned to the goals of the department, which will be aligned to the goals of the organization. So that way, it minimizes the ability to take the ability for people to take 12 different approaches to something. We are all in alignment on how we approach the work, and in doing so, we will be able to collect clean data that we can evaluate and understand, are we making an impact? Is the program doing what we intend for it to do? Where are the opportunities for improvement, and make shifts should we need to? Theme number 2 is, again, going back to understanding the need for Youthline. So if you remember some years ago when Youthline began, nearly 30 years ago, that was a period, and you've heard me say this, when examining kids' risk factors was the approach to youth development. And in many ways, the program is still operating with that in mind. How are, thinking of kids at risk. And so we want to update the model to be more of an asset-based approach. And the action will be adopt and implement a new Youthline program model, which you'll see in a second. Ensure predictability for participants. And this is happening already, but really want to hone in on making sure that kids know when the program is functioning. Is it Monday, Wednesday, Thursday? Is it Tuesday, Saturday? So that kids know when they can expect their Youthline professional to be there to receive them and to program for them. We want to establish some program consistencies while maintaining flexibility. And what I mean by that, we'll make sure that everyone is thinking about the program and its outcomes in similar ways, but being flexible enough to respond to the interests and needs of kids at a particular park. We know that our users at any given neighborhood or community is unique, and we want to be responsive to that, but not handcuff people to it has to be this way, this way, this way. Basically grounding the program and maintaining some flexibility as well. We'll also provide regular training and professional development opportunities that stimulate staff to try new things and stay current in the field. The field of youth development is changing, and we want to make sure that people are using current language, using current approaches, and are thinking about youth in a current way, again, not reflecting back to risk factors and those kinds of things. So this is the model that we'll be adopting. This is the 5 C's, which encourage connection, confidence, character, caring, contributions, and competence. So how do we help kids develop self-efficacy? How do we help them see themselves in ways that help them develop competencies? How do we help them feel connected? Research says that more kids in community and in school are feeling more disconnected now than any time in the past. And that seems odd, right? With all of these ways of connecting through social media, through devices and all of that, it actually has had a negative effect. It has caused kids to feel less connected. And so this is an opportunity for us to help build community again at each site, help them feel connected, and then build character and understanding and empathy and those kinds of things that help make thriving citizens for us, for our community. There's a disconnect. There had been a disconnect between the rec specialists and the program and the Youthline staff. And that needs to be addressed immediately. That relationship between those staff members is essential to the success and function of the program. And so in order to help achieve that, we'll clearly articulate the functions and expectations of each staff member. We'll identify the areas of overlap, as there should be. Examine and dismantle work silos. Develop effective communications processes. What we heard over and over again is the ways in which they communicate. Some staff members communicate with their rec specialists very differently from site to site. Some felt like they could just communicate directly with someone and say, here's what I'm experiencing, here's what I'm needing, and it was fine. And other places they felt like they needed to take a different route. And so we just want to kind of streamline that so that people are taking similar paths to getting the outcomes they are expecting or getting their needs met. And lastly, we want to develop and reinforce a one-team messaging attitude and approach. Again, dismantling the silos, ensuring that both the youth line staff and rec facility specialists recognize we are in service of the same community, and we don't need to continue that's your work, I'll stay out of it, this is your work, you stay out of this, but really think of the opportunities for collaboration. And this last one where it says youth line is severely under-resourced, that one is not entirely about dollars. It's really about the ways that people show up at work and feel like they are part of that site. And so if we want people to perform at higher levels as it relates to planning, marketing, and doing and executing their job, they need to have consistent access to workspace. And recognizing that hoteling is a real thing in places, even in hoteling or space sharing, there's some predictability in it. You know where to put your purse, you know where to put your backpack. This hadn't been happening consistently across sites, and so we want to make sure that people know when I come in, I know where I can sit and get some administrative work done. I know where I can put my backpack. And so I just named those two things. And then the last two are strengthening the reserve, how to reserve spaces for the program. Right now, rec centers have a revenue requirement, and so sometimes they may take a permit. They may rent the space that Youth Line had been planning to use for a particular activity or event. And so cleaning up that process, ensuring that we aren't stepping on each other's toes, that I honor the work that you had planned for the evening or for that day or whatever with young people, and how to make sure we're doing that effectively and serving both populations well. And then establish resources and funding for developing the skills that support their professional growth. So again, professional development opportunities, how do they get to see what's current in the industry, how do they get to meet with other practitioners in the field across the city, so that we are doing some cross-pollinating, and so that we are learning from the work that's happening perhaps across the river or in some other part around the city. Record time. Any questions?
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent. Do folks have any questions or comments from this initial report on Youth Line? Commissioner French.
I guess I have more comment, but one question is how are staff responding to the changes that you guys want to make? Has it been a smooth rollout? Has it been bumps in the road?
President Moore, Commissioner French, I think it has been varied, right? And so we know that change is difficult. And so appealing to the human side of change is really important. Helping people recognize that change isn't necessarily about you, what you are or are not doing well, but really it's an opportunity for us to make improvements for young people. And so I think we've had some mixed responses.
I just want to say thank you, Assistant Superintendent Cox. You've been asked to do a really, really big job to, kind of transform what we do with our youth, and it's really important to the city. And thank you, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner French. Are there any other questions? Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, President Bourne. So, Assistant Superintendent Cox, as part of this change, you mentioned that you're establishing criteria and metrics and ways to track and determine whether or not the program is effective. At what point do you anticipate you'll be able to provide us with data that demonstrates that the metrics that have been set and are being collected are demonstrating an improvement in the delivery of this product that we're providing to the community?
President Board, Commissioner Musich, so we should be able to understand how we're being measured as early as December. And I say December because I intend to do somewhere between a 3 and a 5 day professional development session with our staff to get them regrounded in the mission, roll out the new service delivery model, and to help them understand on the front end how the program will be evaluated. So I am still working with the evaluator to sort out what we're looking for in terms of outcomes. So, but we should hear that December.
Okay, and would we be then getting quarterly updates on that changed data model, or is it annual, or how do you envision communicating that out to us as a board?
Commissioner Musich, I could give you activity updates, but as you know, evaluation, we need to have a little distance between things, and so I think quarterly may not show us what we want to see in such a short amount of time. So give me a few days to think about what that could, like, if it's half yearly or we'll do an annual report. I'm not certain.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Musich. I will take a break right now for open time. Maybe don't go far, though, Assistant Superintendent Cox. It's my understanding that nobody is signed up to speak tonight at open time. It's our opportunity for public testimony. Before I open and close open time, is there anybody that's in the audience tonight that was anticipating at speaking at open time and thought that they had done what they needed to do to speak? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'm opening open time, I'm closing open time, I'm going back to Assistant Superintendent Cox. Are there any other questions on the Assistant Superintendent's update? Maybe you didn't need to get up, but thank you for the update, and I echo Commissioner French's sentiments. You're pulling apart a very intricate tapestry and putting it back together. So thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Moving on.
May I give you one more?
Yes, absolutely.
One more update. Full service community schools. So the staff across all 3 sites are at a conference in New York over MEA. So I believe they left on yesterday. So that's where they are developing more skill around that program model. I'd like to give a big thanks to our graphics design staff who created the flyer that all 3 sites will be using to announce parent meetings and invite them to participate in the PPE, which is Parent Participatory Evaluation, I believe, which is a paid opportunity for parents to go out and collect data on behalf of the project. And that is being led by Minneapolis, so the training and the payment is coming from Minneapolis Public Schools. And then lastly, Ann Walther is working with MPS's legal team to help finalize the data sharing agreement between our organization and theirs. So that's the gist of full service schools.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent. Moving on to new business, we have Superintendent Bangora for his big night and the delivery of the 2020 recommended budget. Superintendent Director Wiseman.
All right, thank you, President Bourne, Commissioners. I will try to make this as fluid as possible. We have a lot of slides to go through, but I'm excited to be here presenting my first budget to the board. It has been an incredible honor the last 9 months that I've been here. This is going to slide down, it looks like, with the people of Minneapolis and serving as superintendent of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. I'm incredibly proud and in awe of this system, of our park and recreation system. We are nationally recognized for a reason, and we've been nationally recognized for decades. And I know that we will remain so recognized as the best park system in the country. It is my honor to be a part of that and to continue to lead that, and so that we are nationally recognized in the best park system. And we also know that this park system is incredibly vital to building community and to also improving the lives of our residents and the well-being of our residents. So I would say thank you to the work that you do, and thank you to the staff and the work that we do every day. Let's see if this works. All right. So one of the things that I'm very clear about coming in, I know there was several things that I've said, but I'm very committed to a solid foundation of visionary leadership, clear direction, and decision-making that's based on data analytics. And I know when I first came to the organization, I was very clear that we would be moving forward with analytics and data. I know it's very exciting for a lot of people and our staff, but we're going to lead with real quantitative information. And then the qualitative side behind what we do is very important, of course, to tell the story. But data and analytics drives really decision-making, so we're going to be very focused on that. You'll see that throughout the presentation. During the last 9 months, I launched several initiatives to assess current recreation services and to create a foundation to build upon and create the next generation of recreation. And some of these initiatives, as I go through them, to build onto 2020, is, again, like I said before, a recreation data and evaluation team that we're using to assess services and benchmark against national standards. We have a team that's currently working right now to look at really different models, dashboards, and data analytics to be able to really give solid information and data back to the board and to anyone that asks about recreation or about our programs, that we can give really clear metrics and data. And so we have a team that's working on that right now, and they're creating really some wonderful models that I've been able to see, and we will be sharing that coming up shortly, some of the models that we're creating through recreation. One of the things that we're also, as Superintendent Cox just talked about, the youth line realignment and our rec centers to enhance the capabilities and provide life-changing opportunities. I'm excited about the movement and the work that's being done by Assistant Superintendent Cox and her team, and how we're looking at youth line and how we reimagine youth line moving forward. I'm very proud of the work that's happening at this point, and I'm excited to see as it moves forward, again, to give really clear measures on what youth line is doing and how it's impacting the lives of our youth in the city. Very excited about our program development engine team to research, develop, and evaluate new programs. One of the things that I'm very clear about too coming in is that we have established what we call the foundation. And the development engine that we talk about, it can be called the innovation engine, but really it's a team of people within our staff that are working on very specific programs, and we'll talk about the 6 pillars in a second. But it's a team that is able to do research based on data, analytics, trends, innovation, accreditation, best practices, right? Research, survey, demographics, census reports, things that we respond to that the community needs and that we are clear about it when we deliver programs. And the foundation of programs, we know that this is coming from real information and also community input. So that when anybody asks, why do you do this program, or why aren't you doing this program, we have a clear answer. We know that we're doing it because we've been asked to do it, and we've done it, and it's based in research. So again, it goes back to the data piece where we have a team that's going to be doing the research and developing those programs. So I'm very proud of that and creating that team across the division. And we will be sharing that again further as we show the model and how it lies out. But it's based on data, an innovation engine or development engine that does development, and it moves it then to implementation, delivery to our rec centers. So it's based, again, in research and data. One of the exciting things also I talk about is draft to closing the gap and investing in youth reports shared to the board and to Minneapolis officials. We had the report that I know you've all seen on closing the gap. It was really a further study or further understanding of how we looked at the MPP 20 and the great work that that did, but we were clear about the information that was in there. It was based on the fact that youth was an important piece behind that. It was a fundamental piece behind MPP 20 and the investment and legacy of our youth and commitment to our youth in the city of Minneapolis. So what we did in creating that draft was just to kind of move that to the forefront to make sure that we have the data, the information to share with the community on closing the gap and investing in our youth and creating a legacy of investment for our kids, for our youth. So we can talk about that more going forward, but that was a very big piece of the work that we have done the last 9 months. And then we look at vision for investing in youth and the 6 pillars that I mentioned before. And those 6 pillars are around ideation spaces, which I'll talk about shortly, youth enrichment through community-focused employment, nature programming, cycling, community gardens, and intergenerational centers of excellence. And when I say intergenerational centers of excellence, I'm talking about older adults working together with youth. So our investment in youth working together with older adults and creating a space that we can work together in community from youth to older adults. So those are really important initiatives, and we will talk about that as we go forward. But those are some of the things we've done the last 9 months I'm very proud of, and the staff has worked through. So as we continue to integrate criteria-based systems and to use the racial equity lens for decision-making in everything we do. Some of the things, as we know, is MPP 20 capital improvements, rehabilitation funding, regional park capital improvement funding, recreation center funding, department budget goals, 2020 budget adjustments. So that's in everything that we do, and I'm very proud of the fact that we do these things with our racial equity lens and the work that we do. And I'm very proud of the staff and, of course, the board as we continue to use that model and move forward. And I believe and I understand that it is the first in the country that really has used this model, and it's been very powerful. So we continue to do that. So this budget also supports the MPRB's commitment to strategic long-term planning and provides for the completion of the MPRB's next comprehensive plan. It also supports the 2018 and 2022 strategic directions and performance goals adopted by the board on April of 2018 and also 2019 respectively. So I'm going to go into some of these strategic goals. And as we talk about them, we know that those goals in the board, as we adopted this, revolves around 4 priorities: investing in youth, being financially sustainable, protect the environment, and engage communities of power. So again, those 4 priorities that I just mentioned, and the first priority that we talk about is strategic direction A, which is investing in youth. So in September of 2019, we again produced Closing the Gap, Investing in Youth. And really what it looked around was MPRB's investment in youth has increased slightly, that this board and this organization has done, but it's not enough to fill the gap. When we did the study, we looked at basically back in early 2000 up to 2019. We looked at a current service level of programs that we provided for youth that we continue to do, but we also looked at the investment that was provided to youth. And if you look at the graph, you see that the investment in youth was declining, but our services remain the same. After 19 years, when you look at the end of it, the gap between those two things, between those two lines, was really around $2 million. And those numbers vary because it could be depending upon what we can get from philanthropic organizations or private organizations or whatever it might be, or it could be more because it depends on what we do to invest in youth. But when we looked at the gap was around $2 million. What we also understand is that we need a quality, innovative programs to serve the youth. And we know that that's regardless of their ability to pay. So that gap exists, it's real. And what this goal that when we showed the gap was to try to figure out and understand the gap that we're providing service to our youth, we can articulate and show that gap through this report. So we're committed to really working hard and to be able to close that gap. Minneapolis Park and Recreation is uniquely positioned to address those needs. We continue to work with the city and to partner agencies to establish a sustainable youth investment. We have the staff, we have the buildings, we have the skill, we have the people to do the work, and we're committed to show that work and to be able to prove and show the abilities of what we have within Park and Recreation to meet the needs of our youth, which is critical. So when we looked at the recommended budget for another what we call payment towards filling that gap, which the board was very clear directing, we looked at hiring an additional 60 youth in high-quality employment programs. We do that exceptionally well, as we all know that we have probably one of the best programs for youth in the city that we provide for our young people. We operate 2 ideation spaces to teach digital literacy skills. And at those ideation spaces, I want to be very clear about what they are. These are opportunities for our youth to really work in and to be in a space that's peer-to-peer, that is about technology, it's about digital literacy, it's about doing documentary work, it's about doing art, music. It's providing a place for youth to experience their creative abilities, to expose that. So these spaces that we create are really multifaceted and offer an opportunity to our youth to develop in ways that they might not have known. And these spaces create that opportunity or afford that opportunity in our parks so that youth can do some wonderful documentaries or create their music or learn about STEAM or STEM. And so we have an incredible opportunity to do that with our youth with these ideation spaces. And we'll talk more about that too going forward. But it's also to offer free after-school programming for up to 80 youth at our 4 sites. So we're looking at 4 locations throughout the city that will be very similar to what we call, not called Rec Plus, but actual locations across the city where we have youth that will be able to go to free after-school program. And it'll be certified staff that'll be working with our kids across the city, not 1 location, but 4. And we're really proud of that. And so we want to be able to, again, offer that out as an opportunity. And also to establish a youth advisory council to engage staff and community to advance the programs. We talk about youth all the time. We want to make sure on behalf of the youth and on their backs that we are doing the right work for them, that they're present at every one of our meetings and they're present at the things that we do for our youth, that they're there and they're speaking on behalf of themselves. And we want to make sure that we can look them in the eyes and we can say, we are investing in you, we are committed to you, and we're going to do right by our youth in the city of Minneapolis. So it's really important that as we create this advisory council, that we have the youth that are going to be present at all of the things that we are doing within the city on their behalf. Strategic direction B, being financially sustainable. And as we look at this, we're committed to addressing ongoing financial challenges to ensure quality delivery of park and recreation services and quality facilities to Minneapolis residents and park users. We've taken great strides and have made really thorough organizational performance initiatives and passing the MPP 20. The budget for the first time reflects the current services levels and includes maintaining service level standards for park acquisition, development, improvements, and expansion. So MPP addresses neighborhood park infrastructure, funding gaps, and to remain in recreation services delivery, regional park system and enterprise fund operations. The recommended budget includes a 5.7% property tax levy to maintain current service levels, which includes a 5.8% increase in the general fund and a 3.9% increase in tree preservation and reforestation levy. The tax levy does not close the gap for the youth, so that's not included in there. And funding for youth and environmental initiatives comes from increases in established fees, addition to new fees, and service reductions in every division. So even though the tax levy did not fund that, we as an organization made sure that we looked at different models to make sure we balance this budget and we support the initiative that we were asked to support our youth in the city of Minneapolis and Park and Rec. Strategic direction C, protect the environment. The mission statement for the Park Board is Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board shall permanently preserve, protect, maintain, improve, and enhance its natural resources, parkland, and recreational opportunities for current and future generations. We are committed to that. The comprehensive plan and strategic direction reflect the commitment to enhance open spaces and natural areas management, decrease NPRB carbon footprint, and to increase the use of electric vehicles and reduction in pesticide use. The recommended budget includes management analyst position focused on energy, sustainability, and efficiency, implementation of energy management software, installation of electric vehicle plug-in infrastructure, and the continued reduction of greenhouse gas emissions using carbon footprint analysis, scoping efforts for shoreline management plan, development of urban forest management plan, and implementation of formal criteria for evaluating new equipment. And really what this is about reducing fuel consumption. It's about minimizing pollution and emissions and improving operations through our system. Strategic direction D, which is the last one that I know that the board, of course, as we looked at, is engaging communities of power. And we serve the people of Minneapolis, and so it's paramount that the success that we build upon really a strong and unique connection we have with our residents, and to make sure that we are always vigilant and we're always engaging our community. So we talk about being inclusive to the public agencies, the need to recognize and engage all community members, and to create a sense of belonging, ownership, and power. This work continues along, of course, with the Racial Equity Action Plan and through the community participation in various advisory councils and committees, which we know we have many of them, and I'm proud to be part of those, and they've been instrumental in the work that we do and the decisions we make. The recommended budget includes implementation of a language access plan, the development of a police officer career pathway for non-traditional diverse candidates, and the expanding of an ambassador program for volunteer support. So we're committed to those initiatives to make sure that we're always inclusive and addressing the needs of the community. So the budget is really a culmination of the great deal of work, really talking about really the thoughtful consideration and input from the Board of Commissioners, all of you that we've met, of course, that we've had our meetings, our budget retreats, and really staff. So the budget retreats began with the board retreats in May of 2019 of this year. We received input from, of course, the commissioners. We will receive input from commissioners and the public in November, the next month, of course, and December of 2019. We'll be completing it'll be completed, of course, we bring it to the board December 11th of 2019 when the Board of Commissioners formally adopts the 2020 annual budget. So the board direction for developing the 2020 budget. The board further defined the framework for the April 2019 when it adopted performance goals for which each strategic direction and set the mechanism in place by which myself and the executive team and the organization as a whole will follow. So again, these performance goals were established in 19 and also, of course, for the 2018-22 strategic direction. So we began to restructure the MPRB's budget process to also better align with the city of Minneapolis for improved communication, and it was unprecedented, but we began that process in collaboration with the city and the mayor's budget process. I'm very proud to say that that was a great experience, and it was a great exercise for us to really look at the city's budget and to align that. Of course, the board retreats began in May. The factors that impacted our 5-year financial outlook in the 2020 budget was around operational impacts to meet residential growth with the city, including the commons, labor contract negotiations, the enterprise fund, and the internal service fund stabilization, workforce stabilization, and the city minimum wage increase. Those were all factors that we looked at as we were looking at this budget. Significant gaps of delivery, of course, in recreation programs and services still exist. And we knew that, and of course, the budget reflects the work that we did and put into this budget to support our youth. MPRB's Division 2020 budget requests and funding strategies were prioritized by commissioners. And so through the strategic goals, we were able to prioritize those budgets, or our goals, and make sure we address the needs of the board and what the residents were telling us. So, board direction for developing, of course, the 2020 budget. So the board, based on commissioner feedback and board retreats, myself, the commissioners, and staff began discussions with the city to build the general fund operating budget with an 8% tax levy increase to support MPRB's priorities. And those priorities were to maintain current service levels, to increase investments in youth, to increase access and reduce the carbon footprint, and of course, the Commons Park. Those were the priorities that were clear to us and what we made sure that we were going to address. And in August, the mayor recommended a 5.7% maximum property tax levy for MPRB. That tax levy supported really the current service level, but no additional funds for youth or the environment were part of that budget. But of course, it included the $820,000 from the city sources to maintain the commons, and that's a year-to-year investment, but the $820,000 was present for commons for 2020. In September, MPRB approved the resolution requesting the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the BET, to set the maximum property level at 8%. But as we know, the BET later set the maximum property level tax levy for the MPRB at 5.7%. So, knowing that there's factors that are impacting the 2020 budget. So key service and financial challenges, of course. When we looked at it, we're looking at closing the gap, investing in youth. That the report identifies a $2 million annually to be needed to close the gap. So we know what the report was telling us, and we know that there's a $2 million gap in investing in our youth. Recreation centers and programs and youth development services. So to meet the needs of the residents, recreation centers offerings must be based on national best practices and local research, and has to be responsive to customer trends and rooted in data, as I was saying earlier about recreation. Ongoing engagement opportunities, so we looked at the comprehensive plan, we looked at RecQuest, open park tours, to make sure that we reach out to the community. I'm part of those tours, and I'm proud to say that we're going to be getting out more and working with the comprehensive plan team and reaching out to community and being a part of that. And then the Recreation Division will utilize data for decision-making, accountability, and of course, evaluation. Very important factors that we look at to make sure that we're given the proper data information about the budget. And as we look at the commons, so we know at the commons right now, the responsibility of MPRB as of May 1st, 2019 is the commons. We know right now that it's in district court, it's in appeals, but it's our park. Future operations and as far as how the commons operates and programming costs will remain an issue going forward. But we are aware of that, and we're not sure exactly what those costs fully will be, but we know that commons is a part of our future going forward, and we will see hopefully next year when the district court makes a decision where commons will land. We also have to be aware of partnership agreements and park system expansion. So the board, on the board decisions that require operating and programming funding to sustain our service levels without exhausting existing staff resources. So we know that we have existing parks that we are expanding and growing, and we can name them off, but we have to also be aware of that those factors will impact park operations and funding sources. And also when we look at carbon footprint analysis, so our urban forest benefits and public building energy data known, and also the analysis needed for other MPRB practices that release carbon. So we want to make sure that we are studying our carbon footprint and we're giving the proper data analysis around the carbon footprint. And I do know that the Forestry Department has developed a really extensive study around the benefits of trees using the U.S. Forest Service iTree software to understand the carbon sequestration of trees. And then this objective is to generate a detailed carbon footprint of the entire organization in order to set informed goals for reducing and measuring our own environmental impacts. So we are moving forward with that and very proud of the work that's going to be done with that. So factors also impacting, so key service and financial challenges. We look at electric vehicle fleet analysis. So we look at ongoing evaluations needed to transition from traditional fossil fuels to hybrid and electric. We look at the pesticide-free park analysis. So 2018, we looked at the moratorium for using glyphosate, on using glyphosate and the formation of the Pesticide Advisory Committee. Many of the committee recommendations require greater resources going forward. We look at increased expectation, demand for snow removal, mowing and weed harvesting. So more staff are needed to increase snow removal paths and mowing and weed harvesting that we have talked about in our system to make sure we are addressing the needs of the community when it comes to mowing and, of course, moving our paths. I'll probably say, though, that in the system, when people talk about our greenways and our pathways, I always hear that those are always cleared before any city streets or in cities. So I'm very proud of that. And so we do great work around that. But there's, of course, always that greater need to make sure that we're on top of that and doing the proper work. As we look at ordinance review and updates, phase one has been done, or is now funded for 19, but also, of course, additional funding is going to be required for 2020 for phase two. And looking at that work, it's anticipated that legal and professional services will be required to review the ordinances from, of course, multiple perspectives, including its usefulness, lawfulness, and racial equity, and also will be required to complete this review. So we anticipate that there will be more work that's going to be needed to move forward with that. And of course, the city of Minneapolis had its $15 minimum wage ordinance. And if you look at the numbers, statistics here, we know that there's going to be a greater impact, of course, to the organization up to 2023, projected impact of $2.5 million. And of course, the minimum wage will be indexed to inflation after the targeted $15 an hour wage is reached. But these are significant, of course, factors impacting our organization. So when we're looking at key service and financial challenges ahead of us, and these are other financial challenges. So we have union negotiations or union negotiated settlements and organization-wide salary study impacts. We look at inflationary increases, especially around construction costs. Some other examples, internal service rate increases for stabilization of mobile equipment fleet and information technology. operation facilities investment needed to our operations facilities to make sure that they're meeting the needs not only for efficiency, but also the needs of the staff that are operating out of those buildings. So these are just some examples that you can look through, obviously, that are going to be factors impacting our 2020 budget. So when we're looking at making progress towards our goals, the basis of the recommended budget is being developed under constraints of the maximum tax levies authorized by the BET, which of course did not include the funding for the Closing the Gap investing in youth. So we know that for the fourth year of MPP 20, 3.5 million of that is for the MPP 20 operating cost and general fund. 10.5 million of that is for rehab and capital. So 2.5 for the pre-MPP 20 and 8 million for MPP 20 itself and capital projects and funds. So we also make sure we continue to use the racial equity tool for department budget requests and impacts to ensure additions and reductions to recommended budget, either to enhance racial equity or that did not increase racial inequity. So we weighed, of course, the commissioner's staff inputs with need to provide services within our existing resources, knowing we're at our 5.7% tax levy. And the balanced budget provides progress towards the board established performance goals through carefully considered increases in fees and charges, the addition of new fees and charges, and the service reductions in NPRB divisions. So this team had worked very hard to look at how we balance revenue or cost and also with basically service reductions. So we looked at a balance between those two. So the general fund initiatives, again, it changes in 2020. So we have a current service level, and that's supported through, of course, the maximum property tax levy. And so we know that we're going to meet service delivery needs of new resident growth in areas traditionally non-residential, to maintain the service delivery levels for system development, improvements and expansion, and to meet the responsibilities set by partnership agreements, memorandums of understanding, and other agreements adopted by the board. So these are areas, of course, that as we look at current service levels, that we're meeting those supported through the maximum property tax levy. So the strategic direction, performance goals, initiatives that has been put forward or placed in front of us. And so I'm going to go through these real quickly. So some of the areas, of course, we looked at, we're hiring 60 additional youth in high-quality employment programs. When we talked earlier, we talked about adopting or operating 2 ideation spaces to teach digital literacy and to engage youth in a variety of technology, to provide free after-school programming for up to 80 youth at 4 sites within our park system, to improve service levels for snow removal, mowing, and weed harvesting, implementation of energy management software, management analyst position focused on energy, sustainability, and efficiency, and then water resources lead positions. So these are really important, again, to make sure that we're getting the right people in place to be able to push our energy and sustainability efficiencies, and also, of course, with our environmental push, looking at a water resource lead position. But again, the board looking at how we need to make sure we meet these performance goal initiatives that was put forward us in the 2018-2022 initiatives. So when we're looking at then balancing that with with our fees and charges, and I'll walk through these. So we're looking at increasing established fees and charges. We're looking at administrative and overhead charges for other funds, planning chargeback rate, the Worth Pavilion rental fee. We look at Recreation Center youth field rentals, and we look at semi-premier field rental fees and Recreation Center programs and rental fees. And what's important to recognize about that is we look at, for instance, Recreation Center programs and rental fees, we're looking at really the increase in usership and rentals generated by parks with the ability to pay. When we look at, for instance, new fees and charges in field rentals, we're looking at fees and charges, we're always looking at innovative ways to fund or diversify revenue. So it's just looking at different opportunities. So new fees and charges, we're looking at research establishing specialized filming and photo permit fees, storage locker lease revenue share, low impact ceremony permit fees, stormwater agreement fees for new services, and for another example, wood processing site lease. These are just some areas, as we look at changes to the general fund, these are some areas that we're using to balance out, to make sure that we balance our budget and opportunities that we have within fees and charges. We also are looking at then, of course, the general fund initiatives and changes. We look at service level reductions, and specifically we look at position eliminations. Some of these are, of course, in front of you: summer marketing assistant, community outreach part-time office support specialist, financial and performance analyst, design project manager, and engineer project manager. Those are some position eliminations that we looked at that we're placing in front of you. We also look at program and service reductions. So movies and music series and part-time staffing at events, the Jim Lupian Water Park mini golf, Victory and Lindale School Park waiting pool, extended beach hours due to heat changed from 85 to 90 degrees, outdoor supervision at targeted locations, Freedom School as examples of program service reductions. Other reductions, of course, look around event and facility use coordinator moved to enterprise fund and operating efficiencies associated with energy management, and one conservation corps crew funded through other sources. So again, these are also other areas of service level reductions that we looked at, again, to balance the budget and to make decisions on what's important. So other initiatives and changes to the 2020 budget. So we know that the city management fee and contributions, we know that we have the $820,000 in revenue and expenses for the commons. We know that there's investments that we look in operation facilities. So it continues the Michael P. Schmidt Operations Center's mortgage payment and transfer to capital projects fund. It also begins the incremental investment in facilities based on operation facilities, assessment that identifies system needs, gaps, and opportunities to improve facilities for staff to improve efficiency and day-to-day activities. Operation facilities, master plan operations are all being considered. So these are other, of course, changes and efficiencies that we're looking at in our budget. So, of course, we look at Park Land Acquisition Fund. We're also very aware that the available riverfront land for sale is really outpacing the resources available to making purchases. So we are really clear that we have to have that fund available when the spaces are available, when that land is available, that we have those resources available for purchasing. We continue to the general fund transfer for River First land acquisition, that we're also very aware that we need to also have those funds to be able to continue to look at River First and look at the land acquisition as it comes to park land acquisition funds. We also are concerned that we look at the historic and iconic home funds. We're looking at dedicated funding is needed to ensure historic homes are properly maintained and sustained in our organization. There are many homes we look at right now, the Art Godfrey House, the John H. Stevens House, the Longfellow House, the Theodore Worth Home, these assets that we have within our organization, within Park and Recreation, and we need to pay attention to those homes. I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done on these houses and these sites. Theodore Worth, of course, being a historic home as in 2002. So the $40,000 is the one-time funds to do an assessment on these projects in these capital areas. So, and we also then, of course, look at the general excess fund balance, and it's really supporting funding designated for one-time activities up to a total of $311,500. And some of those areas are around employee onboarding software development, energy management software, lake management plans, automated lighting at Neiman Fields. Those are what those are used for. And so, again, we can share these. This will be in the report that you can look to see what those funds, what they support. And then, of course, we look at the special revenue fund initiative changes to 2020. So in forestry, we continue the tree preservation and reforestation levy. The 2020 is year 7 of the 8-year plan to remove and replace ash trees. and replant trees lost during the storm. So a plan is really needed for the future tree replacement due to disease, of course, and storms. So that's really important, and it's something that, of course, initiatives that we need to be aware of and move towards. So when we look at stabilizing the enterprise fund, we're looking at a really continued aligning activities of the enterprise and general funds, and really to improve conditions of the enterprise fund. So some of the future fund concerns that you'll see before you is really annual subsidies to general fund, the golf industry decline, the debt obligations have resulted in inadequate fund reserves to meet capital investments, and the needs of the enterprise facilities and the deferment of the enterprise fund for capital improvement projects. Our enterprise fund is definitely a concern and a challenge moving forward. Golf has operated a loss for the past 6 years and has a 10-year 2009 to 2018 average net loss of $383,328. So the commitment to evaluate the alternatives and develop a long-range plan within the park system is imperative when it revolves on golf. Again, you can take golf and you can change even the times, and you can say maybe the 4 years, and that will be greater. But going back to 2009, it's an average of 400,000. So this is something we need to really look at and pay attention to. As capital improvements become necessary, of course, and reserves are available, debt, which is more costly, is utilized. So again, it really hinders us from then improving other enterprise assets when we have a loss within the enterprise in these particular funds. So the recommended budget includes a capital improvement program to begin condition assessments for the major asset categories within the enterprise fund to prioritize future projects. And so it's very important for us. And again, looking at the enterprise fund department initiatives and changes, parking revenue increases due to expansion of the Park mobile app to surface parking lots, rate adjustments at Mill Ruins, and adding a paid parking on the Bidet McCoska Parkway at the Calhoun Executive Center lot. Event permit revenue increases from new promotion, commercial, and food beverage booths. Concession revenue reductions at Bidet McCoska until new building is constructed. We know that that is an impact to our current enterprise fund. Golf fee increases and service level reductions from elimination of the golf director position, and conversion of 2 part-time customer service staff to ice arena administrative support positions are all within this budget as we're looking at initiatives to our enterprise fund. So when we look at debt service and improvements, the enterprise fund from 2020 to 2025 capital improvement plan and planning and assessments, design and construction of the Bidet McCosta concession building, code requirements, constructions for Meadowbrook Golf Course and temporary building, and the Theodorworth parking lot improvements and replacement of the gross golf storage building. These are all improvements that we're going to be having along all of these systems infrastructure is what we're working on right now with our debt service and improvements to these assets through our system. So as we're looking at the stabilization internal services funds, equipment and information technology historically has experienced deferred maintenance and inadequate investment. The phased investments have taken place over the past 5 years and have improved the conditions of the fund. But again, we historically look at information technology, looking at deferred maintenance or deferred investment in IT. So we're looking at internal services funds department initiatives and changes in 2020. The additions of a part-time technical support position to support the external public-facing operations, including ideation spaces, making sure we have the infrastructure to support the new technology we're going to do in our centers, ITS expense reductions for vacant positions, downgrade, database consolidation, and removal of the Southside Operations Center as a primary data facility, and also look at asset management equipment services. And so this is use of fund reserves for planned equipment purchases delayed from prior years due to state contract issues and installation of electric vehicle plug-in infrastructure. So those are some areas, of course, as part of this budget, as we look at internal services funds and changes within the 2020 budget. So capital improvement and program, the CIP initiatives and changes to 2020. MPRB is first and only park agency in the country to, by ordinance, enter, it put its entire CIP to use specific and transparent, data-driven measures to ensure racial and economic equity and are accounted for in our funding allocations. Back in 2016, this criteria-based system for capital and rehabilitation neighborhood park ordinance was adopted. 2019, the criteria-based system for regional park systems was allocated as part of the ordinance. So the recommended budget includes proposed 2025 CIP that reflects use of both ordinances and the development of the recommended capital allocations. And with that, I am now going to turn this over to Director Julie Weissman for further updates.
Good evening, President Bourne and Commissioners. You are now being handed the Superintendent's recommended 2020 budget. I am going to walk you through the budget book as I have in years past. And I will also just point out to the viewership that all the budget materials are available on our public website, www.minneapolisparks.org/budget. So the first section of the budget book contains the superintendent's budget message and the budget highlights. So that's the information that the superintendent has just presented to you. So if you want additional information or are interested in a specific item, you would look in this section for that information. The next section of the budget book is the strategic directions. I'm going to just spend a little bit of time here because this section of the budget book has expanded. So you will now see the 2018 to 2022 strategic directions. You will also see the performance goals that were adopted in April of 2019. You are also going to see milestones where the divisions now that are responsible for each of these areas have elaborated what their milestones will be each year between 2019 to 2022. And then we also have included accomplishments. So we've included things that have happened in 2019 and then the items that are now recommended in the superintendent's recommended budget. So on your screen, I'll bring you to, I just am highlighting strategic direction A, the investment in youth, and the performance goal A2, which is around youth employment programs for ages 14 to 24. And the goal is to sustain growth by 25% by 2022. So the milestones are shown here that were adopted by that will be worked on over the next 4 years. And then in the accomplishments, for 2019, we completed the baseline work for youth employment programs. Through the 2019 budget, we funded the hiring of additional 30 youth through the Teen Works program and funded one additional Conservation Corps crew that wasn't able to start work in 2019 but will be working in 2020. And then in this recommended budget, we have an additional 60 youth that are throughout the entire organization. So between 2019 and 2020, we will be increasing youth employment by 106 youth, which is 14%. So it's more than halfway to the 25% goal that's been established for 2022. The next thing that I will point out is that each department has department goals. And so I'm showing the example of the recreation centers and program department goal around the development and implementation of 2 ideation spaces. We identify those goals, we link them to the comprehensive plan, we link them to the strategic direction and the strategic direction performance goal. And then we also identify it if it is directly linked to the racial equity action plan. So for this particular goal, it's aligned with all 3 of those documents. The next section of the budget book is the background information, which includes the service area map, organization chart, some fund definitions and information, and then an acronym section. Then we get into the financial sections of the budget book. The first section is property taxes and local government aid. What I'd like to highlight for property taxes is, again, the BET set the maximum levy at 5.7% or $69.5 million. And that funds our current service level but does not close the gap on our youth investment. I will highlight that the city's property tax went up 7.7% for a total city tax increase of 7%. Local government aid, between 2008 and 2011, during the economic downturn, state budget deficits resulted in substantial reductions to local government aid. Local government aid has stabilized and it began increasing since 2014, but we have not reached our certified high amount that was back in 2010 of $10.6 million. For 2020, the MPRB expects to see an increase of just over $250,000 in LGA for a total of $9.6 million. So now the next section, we move into the general fund. Our general fund budget is $89.1 million. It is a 5.8% increase. On the expenditure side, wages and fringe is almost 70% of our general fund budget. When we look at expenditures by division, you will see that the largest increase in 2020, between 2020 and 2019, is in the environmental stewardship area. And then the second largest increase is in recreation with $1.6 million. One of the questions and comments that I've heard most from this board when we talk about budgeting is that this board wants to see their values reflected in the budgets in which they adopt. So I believe that that is starting to be shown and reflected. In 2019, you added $1.2 million to environmental stewardship. This year, you're adding $2.5 million to environmental stewardship. A lot of those increases are based on union negotiations, environmental initiatives that this board is supporting and providing funding for. And then in recreation, you're seeing a $1.5 million increase in 2019, between 18 and 19, and another $1.6 million increase going into 2020. The thing that you can't see in our presentations and the way that we account for youth programming is that youth programming and youth initiatives and youth employment is throughout our entire system. So I provided a chart for youth programs and youth employment throughout our entire system, and you can definitely see the growth in the youth programs since the start of 2018. So in 2018, youth programs and services was $12.8 million. It was 15.9% of our general fund budget. In 2019, your approved budget contained $13.9 million for youth programs and services, which was 16.5% of the general fund budget. And now with the superintendent's recommended budget, youth programs and services is $15.2 million, or 17.1% of the general fund budget. So again, that's all the additional youth initiatives, the Walt Dietzig Innovation Fund. It's the impact of the $15 minimum wage as that increase and impacts the workforce. But the thing that I do want to point out is if you turn to page 45 in your budget book, it has information broken down by departments. And although the police department was not reduced in the superintendent's recommended budget, the police department's budget was held constant. It's basically the same budget that it was in 2019. So there's no growth in the police budget. And if you look at the police budget compared to the total general fund budget, it is 7.4% of our budget, where our total youth programs and services is 17.1%. The next section of your budget book is the special revenue funds. The items that are accounted for in the special revenue funds is the tree preservation and reforestation levy, and then those items that are reserved for specific purposes. So the lottery in lieu of operations and maintenance money that is received from the state and then allocated out through the CIP program. Your park dedication fees are received by the park board and then allocated out to the CIP as projects are allocated those park dedication fees. The next section of the budget book is the enterprise fund. And I think you have heard me say many times that our paid parking is actually the service that provides most of the revenue in the enterprise fund at this point. So I was glad to find a picture of our paid parking for the enterprise fund. So looking at our enterprise fund, our revenues are going up slightly based on fee increases. The thing under revenue that I will highlight is the insurance proceeds. We have received the first installment on the Bede-Makaska building. Once the building is constructed, they will make a final payment. And so we have approximately $1 million that will be coming to us from the insurance for the fire. And then wages and fringe and other operating costs are going up 3.8%. And then the improvements, the MRF payment, and then the debt service, that large increase, again, is the $1 million for the Bede-Makaska building. If you look at the operating income by functional unit, again, parking is estimated to bring in $1.7 million next year. Use and event permitting and vendor agreements and concessions. So even with the loss of revenue at Bede-Makaska, we are still looking to have a net operating income of just over $1 million in our concession and agreement. But we did eliminate that revenue for next year or reduced it greatly for the Bede-Makaska operation while it's under construction. You'll see that the sculpture garden is still showing as a small operating loss. We will need to continue to look at the sculpture garden as we are weighing whether it will turn into a self-supporting operation or potentially potentially have to move that. And then I will highlight golf. Golf is estimated to lose $400,000 last year, or next year. This includes, we had to raise golf fees. You'll see that in your budget adjustments. We are proposing to eliminate the golf director, and then we are proposing to reassign golf park keepers in the off-season to other activities. With those three things, we are still estimating we're going to lose over $400,000. So again, golf operations is a priority of this superintendent in looking into the future of what golf looks like for the park board. And then, again, the debt service MERC payments. This year, you will see a 6-year CIP for golf in your budget book. And just like we did with NPP 20, when we started off with NPP 20, the first thing we needed to do was do an asset inventory and do an assessment on the conditions of all those assets. So you will see that in 2020, a lot of the dollars are going towards those assessments so that we will have information that we need in order to identify our priorities in the future. The internal service funds is the next section of the budget book. We have 3 internal service fund operations. We have the equipment, information technology services, and then the self-insurance fund. And you'll see that there's just some slight increases in revenue and some slight increases in expenses in that area. And then the largest increase is in the mobile equipment replacement. And again, the superintendent identified that we needed to do some catch up. So we're using fund reserves for equipment purchases. The next section is actually the capital project section, which Adam Arvinson will come up and talk about. But before I turn that over to him, I wanted to talk about the personnel summary and my favorite slide, which shows full-time workforce for the entire park board, so all funds. And you'll see that there was a great decline during the economic downturn, and then since 2014, we have been rebuilding our full-time workforce. And I think I've heard a lot of times, well, why do we use 2003? And will you be satisfied when you reach 601 full-time employees? And my answer to that is our system is much different than it was back in 2003. So I'm not here to tell you that 601 is our magic number. We have deficits in recreation that we have identified. We still have deficits in regional maintenance operations. So I'm not here to say that 601 is where we need to land, but I am looking forward to the data and the analytics and the information that we will be receiving through ViewWorks and through ActiveNet and through all of these systems that we now have in place to really identify what is the proper level of staffing for our organization. So now I will turn it over to Adam Arvidsson.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Wiseman. Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about the capital improvement plan, which you're getting handed out to you right now. Always a danger to give a lot of numbers and data right before I speak, but there's going to be plenty of time to dig into that, and as always, I'm happy to answer questions, however detailed they might be, as we go through future meetings. Tonight, I'm going to give an overview of the capital improvement plan that is in front of you today. There are 9 pages and they're numbered, so hopefully that helps navigate. Just to give a really quick overview, the first 4 pages are the capital improvement plan itself. Following that are 4 pages of our neighborhood and then regional equity metrics. These are the updated 2019 metrics. And then the last page is an analysis that I'll talk a little bit more about in our presentation. This is a new analysis that we're doing this year based on something that we kind of have been hearing from the community about. So the capital program overview that we have is divided into our regional and our neighborhood. As many of you know, we try to keep a pretty bright line between those regional parks and neighborhood parks, in part because of the funding rules associated with each one. So in the neighborhood park side, this chart shows the amount of money that is being allocated in each of those years. The reason why it varies a bit is primarily because of park dedication. We do only allocate park dedication in the first couple years of the CIP. Park dedication tends to be pretty volatile, so we don't look that far out. So you can see park dedication is at about $1.04 million in 2020. And a little bit less in 2021, and then it goes away. That doesn't mean we won't allocate in those years. We're just going to wait for future years to do it. In the regional park funding, we have several sources that fund the regional parks, including Met Council and state bonding, Parks and Trails legacy funding, lottery in lieu, and then also park dedication sits there. We're in a year that is actually a lower funding year for the regional parks because it is a bonding year this year, which means that our bonds for the regional parks won't kick in until next year's CIP. So you can see on that top line, we always have an alternation. In that Met Council regional park funding, there's always a 0, and then there's a number, and that's because of the state's biannual bonding process. So the capital program in front of you uses updated 2019 neighborhood and regional equity rankings, as Julie mentioned earlier. It includes all existing neighborhood parks, whether they're developed and undeveloped, according to the ordinance. We also continue the recommended process under NPP 20 that we've used historically, which is to honor the neighborhood and regional projects in the pre-NPP 20 CIP, generally trying to keep them in the same years with the same funding amounts. So those are starting to scroll off of the CIP, and we have more and more projects that are brand new under the equity rankings. It also honors the neighborhood and regional allocations in last year's CIP, regardless of the updated 2019 equity rankings. We feel like once a park is in the CIP, it stays in, even if its ranking changes. When project delays are necessary, we use the 2019 rankings then to determine which projects get delayed. And then we select projects in the 2025, which is the outmost year, using those 2019 metrics. So really quick on how to read the capital improvement plan. Most of you have seen this before, but I do a little spiel here just so everybody understands how to follow along. So all the way over on the left-hand side, we have the information of a particular project. So the park and its rank, and if there is a project identified specifically. Most parks in that project line have a general description called plan implementation. This allows us flexibility to work with the community when we get closer to that project to determine what out of a master plan is actually built. So we've moved away from identifying specific projects and gone more towards this plan implementation language. It allows us to scope with the community at the time of implementation. Some projects that have necessary projects do have descriptions. Often these are holdovers from the pre-equity CIP, say for a play area or a wading pool. And many of those also have the same description as before. So the colorful column that you see there is really the reason for a park's inclusion in the CIP. So when we first started with the NPP 20 program, we decided to transition our old CIP into a new equity-driven one, rather than wiping out everything. So the parks that are in yellow are those that were already in the CIP before, and they tend to keep their same funding year and amount. The parks in blue were added by NPP 20, brand new projects, brand new parks that we hadn't considered before, but were important under the equity ranking. The green ones were both within the pre-NPP 20 CIP and also had an equity ranking, so they typically got a boost. As we move along, and you can see in your CIP this year, there's less and less yellow. That means we are, again, phasing out that old CIP, And by 2022, our entire CIP will be equity-driven. There will be no sort of old way projects anymore. We also have some color coding for park dedication and for our playground rehabilitation projects. One point of confusion that I always want to stress is that the reason for the inclusion in the CIP is different than its funding source. And the reason for that is that the NPP 20 does include former bond-funded projects that we got from the city. So it is possible that a yellow project may say NPP 20 as its funding source because it was a bond-funded project and transitioned into the NPP 20 pot. So sometimes there are parks with very low equity rankings that seem to be getting NPP 20 money. It's because they are holdovers from before. The allocations shown in your CIP kind of redline last year's. So you've got a column that shows last year's and a column that shows this year's, and everything that was changed is in red. So hopefully that highlights kind of where you need to look to see if we're making internal changes to the CIP. And one thing that I want to note that's new this year, I'm going to talk about in the very next slide, is that there are some fields that are highlighted in blue. And the fields that are in blue are parks where funding has been normalized to address what we feel was previous underfunding of those parks. So that's one key change in the CIP this year, and I'm going to get into that right now. What we're proposing in the CIP is that 2025 be a normalization year. Some community members, and also the city's long-range improvement committee, have come to me and asked questions about how we determine the amount of funds dedicated to a particular park. So we have an equity ranking that decides when a park gets funds, but how do we decide how much? So what we did, the answer to that question is that we use a general rule of thumb based on the park's size and the amount of amenities that it has. But that rule of thumb has evolved over the years that we have been implementing NPP 20. So what we did is we decided to go back and analyze all the allocations since 2017 in order to understand what are we consistently, or in an average way, allocating to different parks of different types and scales. So currently, at these current general allocation levels, we're going to get through all the parks before NPP 20 expires. And I think that's an important goal for everybody involved. But some parks we felt were found to be underfunded compared to other parks of their type and size. So in 2025, we're proposing to essentially catch up. We want to normalize that funding in parks that we've already had in the CIP in order to ensure equity in funding amounts. We're doing a pretty good job ensuring equity in when projects get into the CIP, but we want to make sure that they're getting the right amounts. And the importance of doing this is that those earliest parks in the CIP were the ones that are more likely to be underfunded and also are the ones that have the highest equity rankings. So we need to be particularly careful and make sure that we invest fully in those parks. So how normalization works. As I mentioned, we analyzed all the allocations since 2017, and we looked at where they were kind of averages and what was the general investment in different types of parks. We established 3 tiers of parks. Tier 1 are the largest parks with the most amenities. Tier 2 are the medium and small parks with many amenities, or large parks with fewer ones. And Tier 3 are those parks with no or few amenities, or special case parks like the Phillips Pool and Gym, for instance. We then established a baseline funding amount that is again drawn from what those parks were typically getting. So Tier 1 parks were typically getting about $1 million in an allocation. It's not an uncommon allocation for us to make. Tier 2 are getting about $750. And Tier 3, being the special cases, sometimes were much lower than that because you could build out a whole park for less than that. We also then looked at a couple of qualifiers. So what if that park had a recreation center? We felt like it should get additional funding to address things in that recreation center to accomplish some of the goals of making that center more welcoming and useful. If the park was envisioned to have major changes in its master plan, that often costs more money to rearrange things, so we put a boost on there too. So an example, Central Gym was a Tier 1 park. So in theory, it should get $1 million. It also has a recreation center, and it was to experience major change. So the investment in that park should have been $1.8 million based on what we were investing in similar parks across the system. We only invested $1.1 million in that park. So there was a shortfall of $700,000 at Central Gym. So what we're suggesting here is that we put that money into the 2025 CIP, essentially to create another project that catches that park up. Another example is Cleveland Park. It's a Tier 2 park, so smaller. It has no recreation center, but does experience major change. So the investment should have been $1.1 million here, and the investment was less than that. The park was underfunded by about $274,000. The allocation we made, though, in 2023, because we already had money for this park in 2023, if I disrupt the whole park and then come back a year and a half later and do it again, that's not great for anyone. So when those projects were close together, we actually boosted in 2023. There was enough ability to shift multi-year projects, funding from year 1 to year 2, and actually not cause any project delays in the CIP when these are being done. So based on this analysis, there are 11 parks that were determined to be underfunded. And it is the last sheet in your packet that shows all the math that went into this and highlights those 11 parks. And you can see they're listed here: Farview, Central Gym, Audubon, Harrison, East Phillips, Stewart, Hall, Whittier, Cleveland, Sumner Field, and Perkins Hill. We feel these are the parks that were underfunded by more than $250,000 each and had no other major recent allocation. And the total underfunding amount is about $5.7 million. All the other CIP allocations in here we felt were appropriate based on the averages that we were doing across the board. Especially recent allocations are much more in line with this than some of the earlier ones we were doing in the very fresh days of NPP 20 when we were building the airplane as we started to fly it. Even with this normalization year, we can still make improvements in the parks, in all parks prior to NPP 20 expiration at this rate. So we're kind of taking a pause for a year, catching up, and then we're going to go right back to what we were doing before. A couple other notes in the 2025 CIP, something I'm very excited about. Changes in the in-years are extremely limited, and project delays are non-existent. There's not a single project delay within the 6 years of the CIP over last year's CIP. So that's positive. After the normalization in 2025, we do get 2 additional parks into the CIP. Typically, we've been doing between 8 and 11, and obviously because of that chunk of money that's going to go to normalization, we get 2, and those happen to be the CPRO site and Botno Park are the next 2 rankings on the list. With those 2 added, 49 of 145 neighborhood parks now appear in the CIP. So we're making headway. Funding source changes do appear with larger projects to allow flexibility in project closeout. So even some of our big NPP 20 projects are going to have capital levy money, and that's a request by finance and by design and project management to provide more flexibility at closeout time. On the regional side, kind of much less complicated, the regional opportunity facilities, so there are 2 parks which have a funding requirement where they get collectively 25% of all the regional money. This year we did an even split. The last 2 years we alternated one and then the other because of some funding needs at Upper Harbor Terminal. And this year we're going to do an even split. Regional facilities ranked through number 11 are now added to the CIP out of 17 regional facilities. So we're obviously going to touch regional facilities again faster than we do the neighborhood ones. And also, as has been mentioned by the superintendent earlier in the presentation with regard to ideation centers, we are showing allocations in 2020 for ideation centers at Whittier and Harrison parks. And there's a $300,000 allocation for each park in the CIP to actually physically build out those centers. The play area rehabilitation program is something that we've done since NPP 20 started to ensure that our playgrounds are kept up regardless of equity ranking. Typically, this addresses critical infrastructure at our most used facility in the system, which has also the most risk. So we're continuing to peel off a little bit of money and do our sort of worst playgrounds every year. It's based on an in-field analysis of the actual quality of those playgrounds. This year we added 3 parks. That tends to be about the number we add. And those happen to be at East Phillips, Franklin Steele, and Hiawatha School. Again, those are the ones with the next lowest rankings outside of what's already in the CIP. The last thing I'll talk about is park dedication allocations. One of the things we have to worry about with park dedication is that there is a substantial amount of money sitting in a variety of different neighborhood pots of money in our system, but we have to also make sure that those can be implemented by staff in a timely manner, so we have to be judicious about how much we're putting in. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to add park dedication to projects that are already going on and to essentially boost them. So we have those projects happening at the parks you see before you: Armitage, Bottineau, Kenny, Lavelle, McRae, Painter, and Pearl. There are larger allocations in places where we can actually significantly enhance a project, and that's at Whittier, Corcoran, and Powderhorn right now. And then there are also projects where there might be large amounts of funding within a particular neighborhood area, but there may be multiple parks or multiple possible projects. And in those cases, we consult with the community to decide where that money should go to. And we have a couple of those. Central Mississippi Trails was approved last year's CIP, but it's 2020 now. This was the first priorities of the NEBNA organization. And then the second one is we worked with Stano to identify the need for pickleball and courts and also picnicking in Dickman Park. And so that's an allocation that's going to come in 2021. And then there is a park dedication requirement to allocate to downtown commons whatever has accrued for the ongoing improvement of that park. That's all I have at the moment. Thanks for your time.
President Bourne and Commissioners, you are now being handed the last couple of documents in the budget presentation. The first document that you're being handed is the 2020 budget adjustment spreadsheet. So if you remember from last year, this spreadsheet was very colorful and it was sorted by division and department. During the budget retreat, when we talked about budget requests, we provided you the information in a different format. It's now being provided to you based on the strategic directions for which each of these items apply to. So this is sorted by strategic direction. So if you look at the document, the first 8 pages are the general fund, and then pages 9 through 11 are the enterprise fund, and then pages 12 and 13 are the internal service funds. And then the attachments that are attached, if it's an increase in revenue, an established fee, or some of the new fees, there's some benchmarking data that's provided to you as far as how those rates, fees were set and established. And then the racial equity questionnaires are also attached for those items that are highlighted with racial equity. The next document that you have is the park funding's fact sheets that we have done for the last several years, so that information is in there. And then again, this copy of this PowerPoint is available on the public website if you want to, or I can email it to you as well. So what are the next steps for the budget process? On November 6th, the Administration and Finance Committee will hold a public comment on the superintendent's recommended budget, and the commissioners will have an opportunity to provide, have some question and answer. On November 20th, the Committee of the Whole meeting will be held with public comment on the recommended budget with commissioners' comments available then. On December 4th, the full board, during the public comment section, or during open time, excuse me, is when the public comment will happen. And then during the Administration and Finance Committee, the Admin and Finance Committee will need to approve the 2020 budget to move it forward to December 11th, where at City Hall, we will hold the truth and taxation public hearing, and then after that public hearing, this board will adopt the maximum property tax levy and the annual budget. So again, like we have done the last few years, and how we handled this last year with you, staff will be preparing for the budget sessions the questions and comments that you have. If you could email those to the superintendent in advance of those meetings, I will provide you with some reminder emails as well. But the first set of questions should be submitted to the superintendent by October 23rd, so that staff have opportunity to prepare answers or prepare added documents if you're asking for additional information. And that will be provided to you before the November 6th board meeting, and then we, as staff, will be here to respond to that. For the November 20th board meeting, we will ask that questions are submitted by November 13th. And for the December 4th board meeting, we ask that questions are submitted by November 20th.
Thank you, Director Wiseman. Just a reminder for commissioners that we're not entertaining comments or questions this evening. Thank you, Director Wiseman and Superintendent Bangora, for your presentation. And you can forward questions and initial comments to staff. Moving on, Superintendent, that concludes your presentation. Thank you, Superintendent. Moving on, I believe we have Deputy Superintendent Ringgold with the Carl W. Croning Interpretive Center study report. Deputy Superintendent.
Thanks.
President Bourne, and thank you for having me here tonight on this topic, and Vice President Hassan, thank you for passing those out. I appreciate that. You should have at your desk at this point 2 documents. One of them is the procedures, the current procedures for naming parks and facilities, and you should also have the nomination that was submitted on September 20th. Tonight I'll give you an update on where we're at with this nomination. I don't have quite as many slides as the last presentation, so we'll go a little quicker on this one, I think, unless there's a lot of questions. So in terms of nomination details, this nomination was submitted on September 20th by President Bourne. In review of the procedures, the nomination was submitted correctly and contained all of the necessary information. By our procedures, we are required to make sure that copies are sent to a certain number of individuals, the council member for that area, the assistant superintendent of planning, the board secretariat, the neighborhood in which the park is in, and then abutting neighborhoods to that neighborhood. President Bourne had completed much of that in his initial nomination, but additional neighborhoods were sent a copy of that nomination on October 14th if they hadn't received it. Also, all commissioners need to receive it, and it was included in your P&Cs for the last board meeting. Since this is an interregional park, the procedures require that we submit the nomination to 3 agencies or 3 groups for comment. It has been submitted as of today to Met Council, the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission to be specific, the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission, and the State Historic Preservation Office. We've asked them to give us comments on this, if they have any, by mid-December. The next part of the work would really revolve around public hearings at this point. The nomination actually had several details regarding requests for dates for public hearings. It included the first hearing on April 1st of 2020, the second hearing on August 6th of 2021, and a final vote on October 6th of 2021. The dates in the nomination are consistent with the procedure. The first public hearing being held within 6 months of the nomination, the second one being held 2 months before the final vote, and the final vote being held no sooner than 2 years after the nomination. So all of those dates do work. I will note that August 6th is a Friday night, so that is the night of that. April 1st does coincide with one of your board meetings, so that would likely happen in this location. In terms of notification for the public hearing, we would use our standard notification process for the public hearing, which includes posting a notice within a paper of general circulation, 10 days, 10 calendar days to be specific, prior to the public hearings, having them announced through our Gov delivery, through a news release, and then posted on our website. The procedures also require staff to review the history of the existing name. We have done the following reviews. So the name was changed from the North Mississippi Park Interpretive Center to the Carl W. Croning Interpretive Center by Resolution 2002-126 on May 1st of 2002. The minutes reflect from that meeting that there was a suspension of board policy prior to the naming, and for fun discussion, there was quite a bit of discussion that evening on whether or not the board policy should be changed or not. On that night, the suspension was upheld with enough votes, and the vote for the renaming was actually unanimous. At that point in time, those 2 votes were actually held separately, so you could suspend the rules or suspend the policy and then do a follow-up vote. The naming idea was proposed by the Speaker of the House, Irv Anderson. Irv had sent a letter to then Board President Patty Baker, actually at the time asking for 3 individuals who were within the legislature to be recognized, including Carl Croning. Carl was recognized at the time, and at the time of the change of the name, for his work in the Minneapolis school system as both a teacher and a principal, for serving as a representative in the House, the Minnesota House, and serving as a Minnesota state senator, and many more items were in the actual resolution. Now, that naming actually changed the name from North Mississippi Park Interpretive Center to the Carl W. Croning Interpretive Center. The name change that's being requested at this point is actually a change just in the word interpretive to nature center. I am still looking. I'm pretty certain that the initial interpretive center language came from an approved master plan for that park, but that is my assumption at this point. At this time, staff collectively have spent approximately 3 hours on distributing nominations or copies of the nomination, research on the name, and consideration of the impacts. Our next steps at this point would be simply to wait until April to do the public hearing announcements, and then again the next public hearing announcements, which would be in August of 2021, and then preparing an action item for a final vote in October of 2021. Any questions?
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. Do folks have any questions? Seeing none, Deputy Superintendent, thank you for the report and for moving this nomination forward. And we'll see everybody here in a couple of years. Thank you. Moving on to petitions and communications. This week I will start with Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, President Board. Last week I had the opportunity to work with the twins. I'm sorry, I have a cold, and my cold medicine's wearing off, so I sound a little stuffy. I had the opportunity to work with the twins and the twins ground crew and Toro to rebuild the baseball softball fields at Pro Park. It was awesome. It was a super fun thing to do. I got to learn how to use the equipment and get a lecture about how I did not have all of the appropriate personal protective equipment to be using it. So I did have boots and safety glasses, but not a helmet. Sorry about that. But it was super fun to see how this equipment is used and the intense amount of work that goes into building pitching mound and getting a field to be even and getting all of the soil in the right place and getting the grass put together in a way that doesn't impede ball rolling. So it was really beautiful just to see all these people out there helping us make this space function better for our families that are out there using it. I wish that we could do this everywhere or have enough staff that they were able to do it without requiring 70 volunteers to come out and spend an entire day working on it. But it was a really enriching experience. I was glad I had the opportunity to do it. When they come to your area, please take the opportunity to learn about how all that works. It's way more intense than I thought it was. It's been raining a lot. I'm sure everyone's shocked that I'm, again, talking about wet things. The athletic fields are really wet around Nokomis, at Solomon, along Minnehaha Creek. I would ask that people please be gentle with them. The grass really can't handle intensive use at this time. There are a couple of trails where pedestrians are unable to use them, so they've been rerouted to bicycle trails. Please, be respectful of folks, yield to pedestrians. I'm hopeful that we're going to get that mild winter that they keep telling us is maybe coming, and we will not get as much snow. And next spring might be a little bit drier, so that we're starting from a deficit instead of really, really wetness. So fingers crossed that happens. Anyhow, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Musich. Commissioner Severson?
Pass.
Commissioner Forney?
Thank you. An enlightening past couple of weeks. We had our last Southwest Service Area CAC, and I am just so delighted that how staff brought the community together in consensus on that, and so we will be moving forward with the comments and hopefully have conclusion maybe by the end of this year. And our last service area, master planning. I went MWMO, Mississippi Watershed Neighborhood management organization, at a bus tour, and it was very, very educational in the various ways that MWMO is working with public entities as far as water runoff, and a lot of things that I feel that we can be incorporating, and I know that we are. We were on the tour. Halls Island was on the tour. But it's very exciting, the types of things that are addressing our watersheds, and look forward to working more collaboratively with MWMO. In spite of the rain that happened at the Employee Appreciation Barbecue, it was wonderful to see everybody's faces there, and I watched a lot of the employees playing chess, and I think it was more of a team effort on each side. So that was fun to see the collaboration there. And then probably the most exciting thing was the Minneapolis Parks Foundation's series, Next Generation, where the New York City Commissioner Mitchell Silver came in and shared, how they are dealing with their neighborhood parks and making them more accessible. And I found a lot of takeaways there. And then the following day, we had a roundtable with him, and I found that he was addressing how do we maybe look at our comprehensive plan and our future vision, and that maybe to have the touchstone of why and how did we originate, and to see whether or not are things relevant there. And then lastly, just the other night, was the clay courts kickoff for they called it friend-raising, but hopefully it was fundraising, and they received a $5,000 check, which was very exciting. So I look forward to their successes and hopefully something in the ground next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Commissioner French.
I meant to talk about this last meeting, but I went to a graduation ceremony for some young men at Central Park Gym, the Young Journalist Program, where went about for the last 6 or 7 months interviewing folks in their neighborhood, doing stories about school, doing stories about what goes on at the park. And they all got awards at the end of the ceremony, and the community came in and gave them some good appreciation. So I'm hoping to get these kids actually to come before the board and show a little bit exactly what they've been doing for the last 6 or 7 months. Stuff like that, it's really important to me. Stuff that when the kids go do stuff and they show initiative and they show some follow through, it's really important for us as commissioners to go and show up and just let them know that people are looking out for them and caring about them. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner French. Commissioner Kogel.
Thank you, President Bourne. Just a couple of things. I also just want to say thanks to the staff who worked so hard with the Community Advisory Committee on the Southwest Service Area Master Planning engagement process. Looking forward to that final document and reviewing that. Certainly a substantial effort, and can't thank enough the neighborhood volunteers who spent so many hours listening to community members and evaluating plans and thinking about the future of all of our neighborhood parks in the Southwest area. I also had the opportunity to meet the Commissioner of Parks from New York City on Friday morning. I had a very good conversation in the morning. It was exciting to get a different perspective on what's going on in New York and the issues and kind of ways they set up their parks, and the various ways to get things done. I think it was somewhat inspiring to kind of see the differences and similarities and see what we're doing well and how we can also improve. Last thing that I just wanted to mention is to make all commissioners aware, I'm very interested in seeing how we can expand our partnerships around tree canopy. There's a lot of interest from neighborhood groups in my district, certainly, around being partners in that work. And I know that our staff has done a fantastic job at enhancing the partnerships we already have, but I'm looking forward to continuing to expand those partnerships as we continue to have to fight against tree loss, and especially in my district with the Southwest LRT coming through, a lot of trees being lost there, at least for the time being. So I've had community meetings on this subject. We'll continue to do so. Also have met with the Downtown Council, Downtown Improvement District, and Green Minneapolis on this subject, and look forward to continuing those conversations. And any commissioners who would like to be involved in that, please let me know, and I'd get you keyed into it. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Kogel. Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to lots of budget document reading over the next couple weeks. And the public has, opportunities to speak about what their priorities are at our meetings. But I also wanted to provide the opportunity to have some more interactive conversations. So I'm going to host a listening and discussion session about the budget on Thursday, November 7th at Northeast Rec Center. That'll be at 7 p.m. So if you want to come and tell me what your priorities are and have some conversations about the budget, I'd be happy to hear them.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Commissioner Vita?
Thank you, President Bourne. I just want to thank everyone. I've been gone for a while, but I just want to thank everyone for all the love and support. I lost my uncle about a month ago, who was like a very special person to me. And so I received beautiful cards, flowers, texts, emails, phone calls from park staff, from fellow commissioners. I appreciate it. My family appreciates it a lot. My uncle took his own life. He was a senior who was just sad about being a senior. So every day I just think about what we can do for our seniors in our park system. Just creating opportunities for them to get out of the house, to still feel like they are a part of our communities. I mean, he just hated being older. He hated being a senior, and it bothers me every day that he just didn't have access to what he had when he was a younger man. So thanks again for all the support. I really appreciate it. Today actually made a month. It's been a really hard month for me and for my family, but when you have support, when you have friends and colleagues who support you, who check in on you, who text you early in the morning and make you laugh, it really does make a big difference. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Vita. Vice President Hassan?
I'll pass.
Thank you. I will also pass this evening, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, we are adjourned.
Time being 7:16, I'd like to call to order the Recreation Committee. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Forney.
Here.
Commissioner Musich.
Present.
Vice President Hassan.
Here.
Chair French.
Here.
You have a quorum.
I'd like to seek approval for the minutes of Wednesday, September 4th, 2019.
So moved.
I'd like seeking approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor of approval of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All not in favor, say no. No. Approval of minutes from Wednesday, September 4th, 2019.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes from 2019, September 4th, say aye.
Aye.
All not in favor? Okay. So we only have one item tonight. We have an action item. The board adopts the resolution 2019-346 captions as follows. Resolution 2019-246, resolution approving harness agreement with Sports Quest Skating Academy, SQSA, at Parade's Ice Garden for the term until December 31st, 2021.
I would move that item.
So moved. Is a second?
No second.
We don't need a second in committee. You can ask if there's discussion.
Any discussion or questions? No discussions or questions? All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor of 2019-246, say aye.
Aye.
All not in favor, say no. Ayes have it. Thank you. Time is.
If I could just clarify that it's item 2019-346. You said 246, just for the record. I wanted to make sure
You're out of
that it
order.
was correct.
I seek, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All not in favor, say no. Thank you.
I'd like to convene the planning committee. Would the secretary please call the roll at, what are we at, 7:19?
Commissioner Meyer.
Present.
Commissioner Vita.
Here.
Vice Chair Cogill.
President.
Chair Forney.
Here.
You have a quorum.
I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of Wednesday, October 2nd, 2019. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Okay, we have one action item. Somebody would read the resolution.
I'd like to move Resolution 2019-347, a resolution approving the slate of individuals to serve on the Community Advisory Committee for Parks for All, the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board 2020 Comprehensive Plan.
Any discussion or people wanting a presentation on this?
Say I'm looking forward to approving it, and I'm excited for the advisory committee to get going.
Okay. All those in favor of the resolution, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Okay, I will then ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay. Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned.
The time being 7:20, I would like to call to order the Administration and Finance Committee. Will the Secretary please take the roll?
Commissioner French.
Here.
Vice President Hassan. Here. Vice Chair Cogill.
Here, present.
Chair Vita.
Present.
You have a quorum.
I would ask for a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor of approval of the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. I will ask for a motion for approval of the minutes from Wednesday, October 2nd, 2019.
So moved.
All those in favor of approval of the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion passes, and we have one action item.
I'll move Resolution 2019-348 to resolution approving a neighborhood revitalization program action plan project funding agreement with the Lowry Hill Neighborhood Association to contribute $300,000 towards the reconstruction of Seven Pools Fountain, a component of Thomas Lowry Park.
Any discussion?
Just to say a couple of words here, I'm excited to see the support of the neighborhood on this project. This is an iconic fountain and something that is clear to me a priority of the neighbors, and not just folks right in the area, but folks who come to this little triangle from all over the place. And I appreciate that the Friends group and the neighborhood and in fact some adjacent neighborhoods have taken up the mantle of working together to make this a priority locally, and I appreciate the staff's work on bringing this forward and supporting the work of the neighborhood on this project. So thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of Resolution 2019-348, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. I would ask for a motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
So moved. So moved.
All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Wowzers.